am the founder and one of the support team for Awkwardly Zen. And I am so excited today to introduce you to Dave the Mystic, and let him teach you a little bit about some of his experience with clearing and clearing entities. So Dave, I'm going to have you take it and tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. Well, my daytime career has for a long time was aerospace engineering. I'm an electrical engineer. I discovered that I wanted to do that at a very early age. In about fifth grade, I got fascinated with electronics. I had to know everything about them. And, that was a long time ago. We're talking about maybe 1965. So I'll date myself a little bit. My dad was an engineer and an Episcopal priest. My parents divorced when I was around 11, and I got involved in this just a little bit on the periphery. My mom got very interested in astrology when I was in junior high, and I sort of became her test subject for trying other things. I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, which is not one of the hotbeds of woo-woo land. Pretty tame there. And my older brothers would have nothing to do with my mom on doing psychic stuff. So I did it. So I was open to it. And then moving forward in time, I went to college, went to grad school, got my master's in electrical engineering. I worked at General Motors for a couple of years in Michigan, got tired of Michigan and GM, moved back to Wichita. I worked for Boeing for a couple of years, found I really didn't like Wichita as an adult, and didn't like Boeing that much, and they wanted to move me to Huntsville, Alabama. So Mark Marietta came through town from Denver, and I came out and interviewed and hopped on that train really nicely in 1981, and ended up out here. The big shift for me came in 1983. I went to my 10th high school reunion in Wichita. I ran into an old friend, and he asked if I'd become an electrical engineer like I had planned on. I said yes, and he said, "Do you think it's possible to change things at a distance?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He wouldn't tell me. And then finally, he said, "Look, come over to my house after the picnic. I want to show you some things." And we went to his house, and he showed me that mentally he could change electronics every time with a significant effect. He focused on it, and he'd kind of point and say, "Now," and things would change. For example, on a little black and white TV with rabbit ears, he put it on a snow channel, and he pointed at it and said, "Now," and he tuned in a station. He did some other things in the house, but we went out to his car, and he started it and had it idling with his hands and feet off the controls. And he said, "Now," and he could slow down the idle to the point where the car was stalling. And he told me he could stall other cars in traffic. The final demo, we went down to the FM radio station where he worked as a disc jockey, and we went in the back room where they have the meters that give the status of the transmitter. This was a 50,000 watt output FM transmitter. It had a digital panel meter that was reading 99.6, and he said, "That's the percentage of 50,000 watts that's going out the antenna right now." He said, I can drop that. I can't drop it very much. I've tripped the station off the air before when they thought it was a fault. So he said, "I can drop it a little bit." And he said, do you see how the meter is stable?" And I said, "Yeah, 99.6%. And he points at it and he goes, "Now," and it immediately drops to 99.2. Well, that was 0.4% of 50,000 watts he just controlled strictly with mental power. Now, I've seen other people who can do some effects, but very few can do it reliably where it happens every time and it's big things. And this really forced me to reevaluate my view of the world through physics, through electrical engineering, all the science, and to say, I've got to figure out how this works. And so starting in 1983, I got involved with energy healing, taking classes with channeling ascended masters through a group that worked with Tibetan ascended masters, doing meditation classes, and also taking psychic development classes. And I just kept doing that on the side. It got kind of funny years later when my psychic friends would say, "Wow, you're like Clark Kent and Superman." And so you're Clark Kent, the engineer, and Superman at after hours doing these things. And I left Lockheed in 2000, went to a small renewable energy company, and I was there for several years. And in readings that I was getting at the time, I kept hearing, "You got to step up, you got to step up, you got to move forward. It's time to grow." And in 2003, I believe the Spirit intervened, and on the side with the company in California, I won a couple Air Force R&D contracts, and then the voice came down in my head and said, "You have all the time you need, all the money you need. Go learn everything you can about healing." And so I left the company I was at, and I had a 4-year period where I could dig into everything, and I learned a lot of different modalities. I had 2 years of psychic mentoring with the Denver medium. I even went to acupuncture school for a couple terms and then decided that wasn't for me, but a lot of exposure. And as I just continued to move forward, more gifts came through. And so past lives came through very easily for me. But one of the big things that hit was sometime around 2008, I was on vacation in Las Vegas with my wife, and I got a phone call. And a woman said, "I'm a friend of your daughter's, and I have phenomena going on in my house. I was hoping you could help me." And she had something walking around her house that walk up behind her and say her name behind her head. And when she was laying in bed, it would press on the covers. Her 2 little children were seeing witches flying out of closets. And it turns out they got a great deal on the house when they bought it, but nobody would tell them why. And after they moved in, the neighbors finally fessed up that the previous owner was an elderly man who was somewhat of a recluse, and he had hanged himself in the basement. And okay, so that gave me a good starting point. So remotely, I worked on clearing the house for her, and she got pretty good results. And then about 2 weeks later, she said, "There's still something there." And I was able to use another tool that had come to me. Something around 2004 in a meditation, I was taken down to hell, or people's self-created hells. From my viewpoint, there is no objective hell, but if you die and you believe in hell and you believe you belong there and you have an image of what it looks like, you can be a co-creator, and the creator says yes. And you may spend hundreds of years in this self-created hell going through torment until finally you say something like, "Is that all there is?" And an angel steps in and says, "Well, you could have gone to the spiritual plane at any time. This is just an illusion." Well, they spiritual beings took me down there and said, "We want you to develop a protocol for returning these people back to the spiritual plane." And so I did. And that came in handy when I found this guy who had hanged himself in his own self-created hell, got him to the spiritual plane, disconnected him from the house totally, and then her house was totally clear. And that sort of kicked off my career in doing clearings. And I've been blessed in this life where, in many cases, I can read a book on a subject and become an expert with one book. And so I look for a book on just clearing, basic entities and or what they look like. And then I just took off from there. And over the years, I've developed and expanded a system that I have where I have a spreadsheet where I identify all the people, all the pets, the vehicles, the house, all the buildings on one axis of a spreadsheet, and on the other axis across the top, I have the categories of things that we're going to identify for removal. And that sheet has continued to grow over the years as I identify other entities. So that kind of brings us up to date about me. I've pretty much gotten out of engineering over the past 2 or 3 years, and I'm doing this work fairly full time now. But let's jump over and let's talk about why do we need clearings? Our vibrational plane is very close to the astral plane. In the astral plane, there are a lot of things. There are hobgoblins and ghouls and demons, and there's also earthbound spirits, people who've died and didn't go to the light. They're hanging around there. They're really confused, frankly, spiritually about what they are, where they should be going. They're just as naive about spirituality as they were when they were alive. So they're there. Other things can come in through the astral plane, and there are darker planes below the astral plane with entities. I was trying to think of a good analogy on why we do what we do on clearings, and I think I have a pretty good one. Uh, Part of my background in graduate school was bioengineering. I had a lot of anatomy and physiology. And one of the things you learn is that all of us, everybody watching me right now, you may be under the impression that your body beneath your skin is sterile. And therefore, if you had surgery, they want to keep everything sterile and not introduce any germs because your body is pure and pristine. And it turns out that's not true. Your tissues have lots of bacteria and viruses in there, and your body is in a constant tug of war to keep them under control. And so we'd like to think that we're pure and you know just totally clean of bacteria, but we aren't. It's in our tissues, and it's hiding in various places in our body. Some people well, we get shingles because if you had chickenpox as a child, the virus hides out in nerve junctions near your spine. And if you're under stress and you lose a little bit of your immunity, it can emerge and give you shingles on the surface of the skin. So, sort of the same thing here. Lots of us are walking around. Many of you watching me probably have some entities around you in your field, in your house, and generally it's under control. You are doing well. You have a positive outlook on life. Uh, your spirituality is sufficient or at a good level, and you're keeping these things under control. You're not allowing them to bother you. In some cases, if your immunity goes down, so to speak, a little bit, you might start having phenomena, you might start having reactions, you might start hearing things, you might have things interfering with your life, interfering with your relationships with other people, and it's kind of like, what the heck is going on? So I think that's a good way to view it, is that, yeah, we do have this stuff around us a whole lot. And even with my clearings, I help you get clear and I give you tools to stay clear. But it's not a perfect system. None of these things are. And there might even be spiritual lessons that are involved here that supersede your desire and my desire to have you be squeaky clean. There may be some reason that the spiritual plane wants you to get some practice or learn some lessons about dealing with dark things. So there are a lot of things around us. They form linkages, they get into our energy field, they get into our house, and they range from being annoying to disabling when people see or perceive things. A lot of you are probably on a spiritual path, and I joke that when you really get zoomed and things are feeling good spiritually, it's kind of like having a little lighthouse on top of your head with a little light that goes dee dee dee, and these dark things say, that kind of feels good. Where's that light coming from? And so the good news is you're spiritually advanced. The bad news is you're attracting dark things, and again, they have a desire to get near you and to be around you, because even though they're taught to fear the light, they know inherently that the light feels good and they want to get near it. So what are some entities that come around frequently? Classical demons. I have a different class of demons that I call large dark entities. They think and operate a little bit differently. We have earthbound spirits, people who've died and didn't go to the light. Another one that I call mimics. They're demons that masquerade as something positive, like a guide or an angel, and they hope to get near you and to influence you. Clairvoyants can see them, and frankly, they look like something is off about them, and their energy is more of just confusion. They don't seem to be too dangerous yet, but who knows? So I just keep an eye on those, and we get rid of them when we have them. There are undesirable energies. People who are psychically powerful may send curses towards you that have a long-term effect, and we can look at removing those. There are energy cords. These are connections from your chakras to somebody else's. Now, of course, there are good ones between you and loved ones, but there are also some that go to complete strangers, somebody you passed on the street. There's an energy compatibility. subconsciously they're needy and they connect to you, and now they're tapping into your energy. They're kind of drawing you down. We also have some other energies in things called portals, and there's a variety of ways that those manifest, but basically they act like doorways to allow dark things to come through, and they can come through into your energy field or into your house. A key thing is 2012 was a major turning point energetically for a lot of reasons. A lot of you remember 12-12-12 or 12-21-12, which was the soul or the solstice, the winter solstice. And we were concerned about what happened to the Mayan calendar, if it ran out, if it started a new cycle. Regardless of those characteristics, it was really an energetic change. And I saw a rapid increase, almost an exponential increase in the number of entities and the number of clearings that I was being asked to do. Things really shifted then. I joke, again, I love analogies or models. And from my point of view, I think that we're approaching a point where we're going to have a major energetic shift where people may go to higher vibration earths, they may go to just higher vibration here. But I think the dark entities perceive that a change is coming, and they're very similar to cockroaches in a condemned building. If the wrecking ball rolls up to the condemned building, they feel the vibration and they come streaming out because they know something bad is going to happen. They don't know what. I think a lot of the dark entities are streaming out of the cracks and crevices, hoping to latch on to people, our possessions, with the idea that they won't be left behind if there is a major vibrational shift. So that's one way I see this on why we're getting so much of that now. Just another side note here. A lot of people do saging, they do feng shui, they may burn alcohol in a cast iron skillet with Epsom salts, other techniques. And in the past, I think those are pretty effective at forcing some things out, some entities out, and keeping them away. At this point in time, with what's happened since 2012, I don't find those terribly effective. They may force some entities to go outside, and then they kind of watch their wristwatch and they say, well, we'll give it a day and then we'll come back in. So if it makes you feel good, do it. You know, that's your prerogative. I just have found that it's doesn't seem to do that much these days. So my point of view. I also work with looking at some of the dark ETs. I see three types of ETs around us. This is just a very loose categorization. We have a lot of beneficial types. They want to help. They want to keep us from blowing up the planet. They're looking for different ways to help us, even if we approach disclosure, whenever that's going to happen. And they fully and without any doubt reveal themselves, and nobody can deny it anymore. I think we're getting close to that. Frankly, I thought it would have happened by now anyway. So we have beneficial types. We have some passive types that are watching, and they're just kind of hanging around. We're going through a major shift here, and it's going to have ramifications around the universe. My point of view is that Earth is one of the roughest, toughest places in the universe, and that we choose to come here because with these challenges, we can make such rapid progress spiritually. I've seen channeled works from ETs where they say you can make more progress on Earth in 10 minutes than you can on our planet in 1,000 years. Why would this be? Well, we're still kind of rudimentary. We still have emotions. Most of the ETs have evolved past that. Another thing is we don't have universal telepathy. They do. Think how different the Earth would be if we had universal telepathy. Anybody who's thinking about committing a crime, they'd be spotted, and they would get a remediation before they did anything. So it would really change the whole moral sense and setting here in terms of free will. So I think that's one of the reasons we don't have telepathy. Again, we're a boot camp here to learn spiritually. And so there's a lot of ETs who want to see what's happening here because we have such a different experience than they have. And then there's a few ETs that sort of manifest demonic tendencies. They are very dark. One of the things that we like to think is, technical evolution leads to moral evolution. Well, we can look at where we are now technically on this planet, and we can say, our morals haven't kept up with the technology. For example, we still have atomic bombs and nuclear weapons. So we're advanced enough to have those, but we're not advanced enough to say we would never risk ever using something like that again on a population. So there are very dark ETs out there that are quite technically advanced. They can zoom around the universe, show up in different places. It doesn't mean that they are necessarily morally advanced where they say, well, we'd never hurt humans, because we're the good guys. No, there's some truly nasty ones out there. And occasionally they show up and need to be removed or escorted away too. So if I start looking down here, a couple other things. So why do I do my clearings remotely? I don't know if I mentioned that. I never go to a site. I'll tell you frankly, I have no desire to see phenomena. I have no desire to see things levitating or people getting thrown around. I do have some friends who've done clearing in the past where they did it for a long time, and they were physically thrown to the floor, thrown against walls, and jeepers, that has no appeal to me. I do mine remotely, and a couple of the rationale reasons I have for that is, number one, I don't want the things I'm going to clear to know that I'm coming. And so by doing it remotely, they don't get any warning. They can't go hide and skitter away and then try to come back. Another thing is, by not going to the property, I don't give these things a chance to try to attach to me when they come off. I had a couple experiences early on where they actually set some traps for me and sent me people where they put dark entities on them with the hopes that in a face-to-face session, these dark entities could try to hop off them and attach to me. And I perceived it coming in and got rid of that risk. But again, that's a possibility. So I've been very successful. By doing it remotely, I clear all over the world, and I can keep the price pretty reasonable by not having travel time or anything like that involved. So those are some of the reasons that I do it, and it's worked well. I'm estimating I've probably done over 3,000 clearings now, and I just keep learning, and new things keep showing up. Another thing that's been very helpful for me out of all this, one of the healing modalities I learned back in 2004, 2005 was Psych-K, psychology kinesiology, and it works with subconscious core beliefs. And typically in a session, you would have a client on their back on a massage table with their arm up in the air, and you muscle test on their arm. You tell them to be strong, and you test things as you had them say statements to identify subconscious core beliefs that needed to be shifted or needed to be added. That experience with the muscle testing, when I hit about 2009, I started doing readings in fairs and at stores, and found that it just wasn't conducive to the idea of me working with people on a table. And so I learned how to muscle test on my hands. And I started out with this one, which a lot of you have probably seen, where you try to break the ring. And I did that for a while, and that worked pretty well. It feels a little awkward at a store. You walk around looking at vitamins doing this, and people are kind of wondering, Mommy, what's that man doing over there with his hands? It just a little weird. And so I just kind of checked around, and I discovered a system where I do it like this now. So I push up with my thumb, down with my index finger, and I try to slide my index finger off my thumbnail. It's sort of akin to using my thumbnail as a stick plate. And so when it sticks, it's strong, and when it slides off, it's weak. And I started out doing it only on my right hand, which was awkward because I had to pick up a pencil, put the pencil back down to write, all that. And so I learned how to do it on either hand. So I can just go back and forth. And so when we're identifying how many of these entities are showing up on the worksheet, and if you want, after the show or after this presentation, you go to my website, davethemystic.com. You'll see an entry that says worksheets for download, and you can see my worksheet that I use. So in the session, we first session, first call, we each have a copy of it, and I muscle test to identify all the different kinds of entities, and you fill it out while we go along. And so that works pretty well. Now, I've taught a lot of people muscle testing, and I've worked with a lot of people on core beliefs about muscle testing, because if I look around all the pictures, you'll probably all nod your head when I say the biggest problem with muscle testing for yourself is I think that I'm influencing the answer to get what I want, and it may not be the truth. And that's a very common thing. And so I work with people frequently in sessions to help them release those core beliefs that I'm just getting the answer I want. But I want to digress here too, and also help you get more comfortable with a different issue on this. Sylvia Browne had a lot of books, famous medium. She died several years ago. She wrote in one of her books something I think is very important to keep in mind. And she wrote, on a good day, I'm 60 to 80% accurate. And on a great day, I'm 90% accurate. She never said 100%. And if you think about it from the viewpoint of the universe, for example, if I was 100% accurate on muscle testing on any question you had, I'd have a line out the door a mile long, and everybody would want to know exactly what was going to happen. Now, what's the consequence of that? Well, if you ask me, okay, Dave, when am I going to die? I say, okay, well, it's May of 2022. How would that affect your life? You just kind of give up. And the universe doesn't want you to have the full game book, the cheat book for your life. They want you to have challenges. They want you to explore. They want you to try things. And so I do the best I can with muscle testing. I've worked for years to be the most clear I can on your behalf to do this. Am I perfect on all these aspects? Absolutely not. But the flip side is there may be some things that the universe does not want you to know and have the perfect answer to. They want you to continue striving and figuring out how to move along. And so I may not be granted to give you that information too. So I think that's true in any type of reading. And going back to a little bit to what Ari was saying about views, I never use a should. Here's my viewpoint. I'm going to give you the Big Dave image. If any one of you and I were meditating together and we were journeying to a higher dimensional place, and we both had a profound experience there, the problem that we have is our brain can only talk about and use words and images for something that's in 3 dimensions. And if you and I traveled jointly and went to a place that had 5 or 6 or 7 dimensions, it might be the most wonderful experience, the most awesome experience. And when we come back here, we can't describe it. And our subconscious works this little rear end off trying to come up with images and metaphors to help us sort of understand what we saw. Now, the stock material you have in your head may be different than the stock material I have in my head, and the subconscious works with what's available. So you might get an image that you were around a flock of sheep. That's the best image that your subconscious can give you for where we went. And I come back and I get a Disneyland party that has all the animated characters. And that's the best that my subconscious can do. I would never tell you, I know I got it right, I'm experienced, and therefore you're wrong, try again, throw away that image and use my image. I would never tell you that. And I find that disappointing in some people who teach seminars and other things that they would basically tell the class it's either my way or the highway. Don't question me. Everything I have, I've gone through experience, and I know that it's true. You're never going to hear those words from me. If you want to come to me and you say, I have an experience that I can't figure out, I can't puzzle out, it doesn't make sense to me, I'm happy to help you try to tease it out. But I'm never going to tell you, I'm sorry, you're wrong. I would never do that to anybody in any of these areas because I just believe that we don't have the tools in 3D to say that we have absolute truths about higher realities. It just doesn't exist. So moving forward a little bit, going back to the worksheet, as I said, my worksheet is dynamic. Here's some things that have shown up in the past couple of years that are a little bit different, and I work with these. One is I'm getting demonic animals showing up as other entities on my worksheet. Now, probably most of you are familiar with the concept of totem animals. Native American tradition, you can find it online, find it in books, lots of material out there where you're trying to make a decision and suddenly you see a coyote, a fox, a deer, a turtle, a badger, a beaver, an eagle, a hawk, all these types of things. And they all have different meanings. And it can be seen as a very positive effect. And in fact, some people, I've been in some classes and things where you sit there and stare at each other, and you actually may see the person's face shapeshift into one of these totem animals. It's very, very fascinating to see that. So they have these out there. Well, the dark side takes advantage of these, and so they've been saying, well, if you guys can do it, we can do it. And so now I'm running into dark entity forms of these totem animals. So I call them demonic animals. And I've had things all over the map. I've had horses, dogs, rhinoceros, hippos, elephants, just all kinds of things. And the way that I know that I get some validation for these is they they show up for people where I say, okay, in the past months, first off, are you clairvoyant? Well, maybe a little bit. I might occasionally see something. And when I ask them, out of the corner of your eye, have you seen things like what you thought might be a dog? And then you look and there's nothing there. And they say, oh yeah, all the time. And frequently what they're seeing are these demonic forms of these animals, and they're in their surroundings. And the good news is after the clearing, frequently all that phenomena goes away. So I do feel that there's justification for seeing this and that this is happening. Another thing that I've seen that the dark side has co-opted. I want to get into witches a little bit. Now, the vast majority of people killed for witchcraft over the centuries, they were good people. They're in the wrong place, wrong time. They might have been mentally ill. They might have been a little quirky. They may have been herbal healers who got crosswise with the official allowed healing path. They might have been widows where people wanted to steal their property. So they accuse them of witchcraft, and then especially if they had a cat, and use that as an excuse to get rid of them and take their property. I've watched this over the years because I'm very disappointed in his behavior, and the latest estimates are over 100,000 women, teenage girls and women being killed in Europe for witchcraft. So it's not just 10 here, 20 there. There was one town that they found some records, and the town was proud of the fact that they had killed every female in this town. It was in Germany, and it's just horrific. Now, having said all that, were there truly some bad apples, some really bad actors? Yeah, absolutely. There were alchemists, there were wizards, there were witches, There were other nasty types, especially in the Dark Ages. There may have truly been a fair amount of magic going on in that time period. There's a lot of mythology to it. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and Merlin and stuff like that. Um, so there were perceptions that that stuff was going on, and it's hard to tell. With the beginnings of science, the beginnings of math, things like that, how that was being affected. But there were some truly horrifically bad women who would style themselves as witches, and these people, when they die, they know they're bad. The last thing they want to do is risk going to the spiritual plane and meeting God and being told what a bad person they are. So they stay in the astral plane. And in some cases, over the centuries, they try to track the vibrational patterns of their apprentices, who they left behind, and to see where they've reincarnated. And so sometimes I found some of these witches are hanging around some of my clients, trying to get into their head and get them to do things. So that's bad enough. But another thing that I found is that some of these dark entities now, what's being done with these witches is sort of that energy of an evil witch model is being used as an archetype or whatever, and they're being cloned. And so now when I'm looking around people and seeing some of the dark things around them that are out of the ordinary, I do find these copies of the evil witch concept. So that's another strange one that's shown up in the past couple of years. Odd ones that I've found, talking about the ETs. I'll fill you in a little bit about ETs. Again, Dave's point of view of just reading a lot and talking to people and experiencing a little bit. So back in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, we had a lot of stories about people being abductees. And we had people like Dolores Cannon pioneering techniques to hypnotize these people to bring out the story of what had happened to them. I think when you look at the big view of that, I think the problem that we had is a lot of ETs found that energetically they could move in and out of bodies fairly easily. And at some level, they thought that we were sophisticated enough that we realized that we are spiritual beings and we're temporarily in a physical body. And therefore, if they poked and prodded and did, weird little experiments to our physical body, no harm, no foul. It'd be like, saying that a robot, with a CPU in its head, and you're sort of controlling the CPU, that robot would mind having somebody drill a hole and attach a little carry hook on it. And you're just like, so what? The real core of that robot is in a memory chip, not in the shell of the robot. They didn't realize how much we identified with our bodies, that, for the most part, people on Earth, when they look in a mirror, they think that's who they are. They don't see themselves as being a spiritual being inhabiting a temporary body that will one day wear out and get put on the trash heap. They didn't understand that. So I think a lot of that has ended. But now I see another wave of sort of this misunderstanding. And I've had a number of properties that I've cleared where I find that there's sort of underground, there are ETs with sort of a little service station. It's like a very small establishment of maybe, a chamber that can hold a couple spacecraft and maybe 20 or 30 ETs, and they come and go there. It's sort of a pit stop. And these are on people's property. This energy from these ETs and their equipment and everything starts really affecting the people on the property. And somehow it also energetically looks like it gets entangled or intertwined with some of the dark entity stuff, and may give them additional energy that they can use to empower them. So I found several of these over the past few years, and I've had to move on those entities and get them out of the location and just ask them to go back to where they came from, or get some help to forcibly evict them, so to speak. They're just not needed there. What else can we do with clearings? One of the things that I find is fun. I get a lot of realtors who come to me and they have a house that's not selling. And so I will do a clearing on that property, but also as part of the service, again, going back to my work with Psych-K, psychology, kinesiology, again, I'll digress a little bit. It has a technique in it where you can have a person be a surrogate for anything you can name. And I've had people be surrogates for flocks of woodpeckers that were attacking a house, to get that consciousness to move on and quit tearing up the siding. I've had people be surrogates for computers to make them more resistant to viruses or easier to learn. A lot of these things, you can have a person be a surrogate for about anything you can name, and the process for doing it is very quick, and it also makes sure that we aren't violating free will or spiritual principles. And so on the house, I may check to see what is holding up the house, and it may be that the house itself has a consciousness and it doesn't want a new family in there. It liked the old family, is comfortable with the old family, doesn't want a new family in. So I might have the realtor or the owner be a surrogate for the consciousness of the house to help it adapt and change the viewpoint that it is willing to allow in other people to come in and own the house. I may have them be a surrogate for the consciousness of the financing for the buyer, or for the buyer's curb appeal, or for the buyer's offer, or for the closing process. I muscle test on these to find out which ones are the highest priorities, and then I'll have the person I'm working with be a surrogate for those. So I've done that. This has been really critical for one realtor who's back east, and she's in an area that was filled with plantations back in the 1800s. And there are frankly a lot of probably unmarked graves from slaves on those properties. And there are still energies from that are still just not in a good way about things moving forward. And so I've done a lot of clearings for places like that. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is, you'll notice that one of the people on the screen is a friend of mine, Julie Aguilar, and I've done a number of clearings for her. And I think we might talk for a few minutes about, how the clearing process, what her point of view on it is. So you can hear a little bit from the voice of experience. So hi, Julie.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Doing good, thank you, and thank you for taking time out this Saturday morning to be here and do this. So I've done clearings on your house, your daughter's house. I've done clearings on where your daughter worked at the School of Mines, because she worked in a creepy building after hours,
Right.
doing maintenance. So what are some of the things that stick out in your mind about the process?
The process, I have to say, is quick, if that makes a difference. I've been to other healers, other people for help, and their help was good. But when I worked with you, I could feel and see the difference within a short period of time, which is reassuring. I would see spirits in my house, and those spirits have gone for whatever reason. I saw an American Indian. I saw my niece who was not at rest. She took her own life, and so her spirit lagged around for a while. And I saw, like I said, an American Indian in my house once, a spirit of an American Indian, which I was okay with. But there are times when I would feel a little uneasy. And after the clearing, I felt peace. I felt, it's almost like, I don't know how to explain it. You almost have to live through it. There's a big difference between spirits around. You can feel the heaviness, I should say, of a spirit. And then after the clearing, it's pretty light, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I know my sister Adele, who worked at the School of Mines, was in an old building, and a lot of the staff would say that don't go in that building at night by yourself because you can hear things. Well, she ignored it. She could hear things, and she thought, well, maybe there's some truth to this. So obviously it was cleared, and she could notice the difference. She felt safe. It's kind of like somebody following you, and you can feel the heaviness of it, and then after the clearing, it's pretty clear, obviously pretty clear.
Mhm.
Whatever that, as far as the healings go, I think I went to you after I had a mini stroke, and I certainly noticed the difference in I went to the doctor's therapy, the whole 9 yards. $10,000 later, it's like, this isn't working. So that's when I met up with you the first time around. And I noticed the difference in my speech within a short period of time. Obviously, I kind of had to work with it, and I did. But it was almost a reassurance of, I can speak now. I can walk straight without them thinking I'm drinking. So there was a difference. I noticed the difference, and I think other people noticed the difference as well. It's almost
Oh,
like something lifts off of your body. But also, I think you need to listen to your body in order to know what's going on and to be able to feel what's happening. But that's me.
well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm thrilled you're feeling better, and the clearings help. And frequently, when people come to me who want to get on a spiritual path, I would recommend a clearing just so they're starting out from a known good place, like a baseline, rather than okay, you want to learn how to do past lives. Well, you can, but you might have some other influences around you that interfere with the information you're going to get when you open yourself up. Um, I think it's very critical. I tell this to a lot of people. Um, some of you may be aware of it, some of you don't or aren't. Um, I think when you're doing things where you're connecting to the spiritual plane, for example, if you're trying to do a tarot reading, or if you're trying to look in a scrying mirror and see clairvoyantly, I think it's important that you set some boundaries there so you don't open the door to connect to things in the astral plane. What I suggest to people is just a couple, like 2 basic sentences. You can word it however you want, but the idea here is, number one, before you start, you say, I only connect to the spiritual plane or higher. And that sets a boundary that says, I'm not going to deal with anything out of the astral plane. For probably everybody listening here, there's no reason or justification for you to go to the astral plane to see what's there or connect to it. And then the second one is, I only communicate with high vibrational spiritual beings. Again, you're saying a boundary. I'm not going to talk to entities out of the astral plane. This is the problem with a Ouija board for people who are naive about this area, especially teenagers. They're very susceptible to it. So they can get on a Ouija board, and basically they're turning on a radio and they're turning on all the channels, all simultaneously, saying, I hope there's something there and I hope it comes through. And that's a terrible invitation to extend to the astral plane, because some things may come through that are very deceitful and very unpleasant. And sometimes once you start making connections with these, you may either get requests or demands that seem perverted, or you may get an attempt where they try to control you or try to steer you to a path where you may be doing dark magical practices. So that's why I recommend, if you have a Ouija board, get rid of it. Could experienced people who know to set boundaries, use a Ouija board? Absolutely. Do they use it as readers? Typically not, because if you're hearing the communication in your head through clairaudience from a high vibrational spiritual being, why would you sit down and move a planchette around a board and have to take notes and write down the message? So experienced people don't use it because it's tedious and slow. and beginners shouldn't use it because they may open doorways that they don't want to. So kind of my view on that. So
Dave, would you say the, oh, never mind, Kathy put them in. Never mind. I was going to have you repeat those two things that you say, but someone
oh
else got it.
oh, thank you for taking care of that. That's wonderful. Um, I thought I might talk a little bit about earthbound spirits. These are the people who've died and didn't go to the light. And when I first started this, and there were earthbound spirits around, um, I took the time to talk to them, find out what their story is, and I did this for a couple of years. And I did kind of a slow approach for moving them back to the spiritual plane, where I'd find out, okay, who would you like to see to escort you? Who would you feel safe with? Do you need Jesus? Do you need your grandma's Betty? Who do you need? And I quit doing it after a couple of years because I found that inevitably they had very mundane stories. I was walking down the street. It was 1932. It was dark, and a truck swerved over and hit me and drove off and left me for dead. And I kept getting those stories. I fell down a flight of steps. I got food poisoning and died in bed. And it's interesting in that, and all of you, I'm going to plant a seed for your spiritual support. You all are co-creators of your reality. And if you have an expectation of what heaven looks like, it's a nice place. It sort of looks like my reality here, but without the problems. And I get there very easily through a tunnel of white light by meeting highly advanced spiritual beings or relatives. You co-create that, and that will happen. There are people who die, like Bruce Willis in the movie Sixth Sense, who don't understand that there's life after death. And some of these earthbound spirits I deal with are those where they don't know that they're dead. They just wonder why nobody will talk to them. And it's funny, they're sort of psychologically ill prepared enough that they don't ask questions like, I don't need to eat. I don't need to drink. I don't need to go to the bathroom. I don't need to change my clothes. I don't need to shower. I don't need shelter. My watch doesn't work. I don't perceive the passage of time. All these things, they ignore them. So you'd have to think, wow, they're getting a little odd in their thinking there. And some of the other earthbounds that I run into, a big group of them, they were addicted to something. It could be drugs, alcohol, it could be sex, it could be pedophilias, all these different types of things. And they're afraid if they go to the spiritual plane that they won't be able to satisfy their craving. So a lot of them hang around here, and they may, the ones who are alcoholics may actually hang around bars, hoping that they find somebody with a compatible energy and they can get into their field, and then they can vicariously enjoy drinking through that person. They also go to AA meetings, and I think this is one of the reasons that some of the people in AA have fall off the wagon, is because they have one of these beings that gets in their field and convinces them to start drinking again through pressure, psychological pressure. Another group of earthbounds that I run into are those that have some level of religious training where they die believing that they're sinners, and they don't think that they're redeemable, and they won't make it into the pearly gates, and they'll be sent to an eternal hell. And so they're not willing to take the chance. There are a few that are unfinished business, and you occasionally run into these where, and these are the ones that try to horn in on mediums, especially if you have kids who are mediumistic, where they have to get a message through to a loved one, and you find out, this is how disconnected they are. They died in 1933. They had the family's cash hidden in a coffee can, stuffed in a sofa, and they're trying to tell their wife where to find the cash and not to get rid of the sofa. And they don't realize that this is 80 or 90 years ago. They have no clue that the passage of time, the wife is long gone, the kids are gone. that type of thing. So some of them are wandering around too. And so there's just a variety of these. And as I come across them, I kind of have an expedited way of moving them back to the spiritual plane so they can get back on track. I've run into a few clients, typically elderly women, who have an earthbound in their house, and it's their friend. And they don't want that friend moved on because that's who they talk to, that's who they hear from. And I sort of understand that. I've honored their wishes, but I think it's a little bit of a corrupt spiritual concept that I'm keeping somebody stuck in the astral plane to be my friend rather than having them go to the spiritual plane to get back on the path of spiritual progress and ascension. So I try to discourage that, but I'm not always successful. I'll also talk a little bit about the paranormal investigators, and they do what they do. They have a different viewpoint than me. For me, if I find people in spirit, I want to move them on. Paranormal investigators seem to have more of an interest in talking to them and keeping them around so that they can show them to other people. And I'm sorry if I'm stepping on any toes here, but I don't particularly like that approach. I'll just say that. Well, we have some time left. Do you want to start opening up for some questions?
Some questions for sure. I got a whole long list for you.
All right.
All right. So first one is, how can you tell the difference between a genuine totem animal and a demonic animal?
I just get their energies as a different thing. A totem animal, I think, is going to be a positive feeling. And again, I do a lot of muscle testing for all these things. And so I would just check that way. I suppose you could use a pendulum, or you could use your own intuitive feelings just to say, is this good or bad? And if it's bad, then I would maybe ask some spiritual beings to come in and escort it away so it's not around you.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
How would you find out if there was a service station, one of the ET service stations that you were talking about, underneath your house?
Most of the time I find it because I'm doing a clearing and the people say, I have weird stuff going on. And in a lot of cases, it's electrical stuff, lights flashing, electronics stopping and starting, electronic failures. Now, I know that there's people who have hauntings and they see electrical phenomena there too. And so that's why you'd have to differentiate. But the ones recently that I've seen seem to be more that there's ET influence. And in fact, one person had a property, and this was a number of years ago, and sometimes ETs hide in plain sight. They can pass for us. They're pretty close. And she used to have a car full of them drive by her farm property periodically, and they were in some distant corner. She had a big tract of land. They were in a distant corner of it, but they kind of drive by almost to tease her a little bit. And so we got rid of them, sent them home.
All right. And yeah, someone just put in the chat that their lights flash, but for them it's their grandma. So it is a case again of checking in and trusting intuition and getting help if you need it, right? Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about like what your clearing ritual on evicting these energies and entities is? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I have the worksheet. I've identified everything. So I have my shopping list. I'm just seeing if I have one handy here. Just a second.
Can I just say, like, I love the idea of the science behind it and the spreadsheet of it. So many metaphysical people are like, I'm just going to go in and feel it. And Dave comes in with a full on checklist. I love it.
So this is a spreadsheet. So after the first phone call, we would both have it filled out. So the client has the copy that I told them what to put in it so they can see what I'm going to clear. And I meditate on this with the spreadsheet handy, and I go into the spiritual plane, and a number of years ago, because of doing a lot of remote healing, spiritual beings built a healing pyramid for me in the spiritual plane. And when I started doing the clearings, they put in some rooms in there that look sort of like the soundproof booth that you'd see at a radio studio. And so for each person or the pets or the house, each gets inside their own cubicle, and they're with the spiritual beings are going to do a lot of the clearing work with me standing outside the booth. Again, I'm staying safe. I don't want these entities to have a chance to get on me. And I go through the different categories on, so I might have, mom and dad in there, and start with mom, and she has 2 earthbound entities in there. So they bring out the earthbound entities, and then frankly, I load them onto a bus. I send them to a temple where they will be moved as a group into the spiritual plane. And that's how I remove them. And then the demons come out, and I have Archangel Michael and his helpers help corral all the demons. Frankly, I give demons a choice. They have 3 choices on what's going to happen. They can return to the dark realm. And I tell them, frankly, they're going to be punished if they go back there because technically they failed in their mission. Or they can go to the spiritual plane and get on a path of spiritual development and moving forward. Or they can just be returned to pure energy and essentially be dissipated and not continue. And some of them actually choose that. They kind of say, if I can't play around on Earth, I don't want to exist. And so some of them get dissipated. And so I do this sequentially with these different categories with each person or the pets. I do pets as a group. I'll mention pets. I clear pets because pets will frequently take on entities to protect their owners. And if they get too many, it can be a health threat for them. Some animals end up with leukemias or cancers if they have too many entities on them. It's just too much energy for their system.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sure.
All right. KO has a question.
Hey, it's Kara.
That's right. Sorry, Kara.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm KO on here. Okay, so, and it's funny, I'm a voiceover artist, so I totally understood what you meant about the booth and being contained. That was lovely. Thank you for that visual. Can you be your own dark entity? And here's what I mean by that. I have worked with soul contracts for many years and, breaking those and letting go of those. But I have just found a curse, and I realized I put it on myself. In a much past life, I was a very nasty, dark, horrible person, or maybe not even a person. I'm not quite sure. But I have come back to haunt myself. So is that I've never even heard of that. Is that what is your thought process around that?
Well, I'm very eclectic, and I do lots of work in different areas, and I work with past lifetimes and parallel lives. I see past lifetimes not as being over and done and the film is in the can. I see them ongoing on their own timeline just as we are. And in some cases, I see people carrying stuff into this lifetime where they were horrible people in other lifetimes, and they incurred a lot of karma. And so I do have techniques and belief statements to walk people through releasing those karmic connections. I even have a separate session where I do a complete karma burning for all lifetimes to remove that. And that's a 1-hour session with a guided meditation in it. And so I do that too. So what you have sounds a little strange, but gosh, I'm Mr. Strange at this point. So I certainly see that as being a possibility.
Okay, good. And here's the follow-up question to that.
Sure.
And I totally understand about, and somebody put in Akashic readings, and I've had those, and I've done a lot of karma burning and that kind of stuff. However, the second question is, and it kind of harkens back to your old lady with her friend kind of thing.
Yes.
I have no interest in being friends with my nasty self. However, I'm very interested in learning from her. So I'm not interested in actually just breaking things and saying goodbye and go away, because I want to know not necessarily why or how, but what is the process? What's going on here? Do you ever see a reason to not break with something? Like, is there a learning process that someone needs to go through?
I would say in general, if you keep that doorway open, ultimately, you may have some unpleasant experiences with
Oh, I'm having unpleasant experiences anyway.
with an attempt of that form of you trying to control you in this lifetime. So I would say that a good in-depth reading to learn everything you can about that person, the lessons that they had, and then ending it with a complete, severing of all the energetic ties to that life would probably be the best part of it. So yeah, you could learn from it, but I don't know that I would continue fostering that relationship to learn more. I think you might just ultimately allow a portal or something to form where
and I fully understand that. Do
you
you
get some things coming through. Yeah.
Okay. Done. Okay. Thanks,
All
Eric.
right. Thank you so much. Just have a bunch of questions to get back to. We only have a few minutes left, so sorry to cut you off there, Kara. Okay, so next question is, after having an entity removed from yourself or your energetic body, what would you recommend for maintaining the clearing and not have another entity attach?
Well, in the second phone call, in the clearing sequence, after we talk about the results, then I give techniques for protecting the property that build on what I've already done on the property. And then also, I have a personal technique. Basically, it looks like you putting yourself inside of a disco ball and visualizing that, and then doing some enhancements to it so that it remains permanent around you. I found over the years, there's some truth to some of the old ancient stuff that mirrors, whether they're physical or energetic, do repel dark entities. And I believe it's because they don't want to approach a mirror and see the truth about themselves. So it is repellent to them.
I mean, that makes sense. I have those days too. Okay. Do you have any crystals or things that you would recommend for like shielding or grounding, keeping safe?
One of the easy ones, and it seems to be effective just as a generic thing, and that's black tourmaline. And it could just be one piece that you keep around you. I see some people with massive ones, but crystals lately have just gotten so atrociously expensive that little pieces of black tourmaline would work just fine. And there are other people who have protective systems. A friend of mine makes these energy rods, and you put them in the four corners of your property, and then you put them in the bisected lines on the property. And so there are systems like that to protect your property. But in general, I think if you do a clearing and then you do some visualizations of protective systems, you can do it. For example, I'll take you way back. When I first started doing energy healing, it was very popular in the mid 80s for people to take their massage tables and they would put quartz crystals in little wire baskets on all the points on the table, and I asked my spiritual guides, I said, do I need to do that for my energy healing? And they said, gee, Dave, why wouldn't you just visualize it and put them in place? Well, okay. So for all of you out there, if you want to just visualize black tourmaline being in the four corners of your property, being around your workspace, things like that, that would probably be just as effective as getting physical pieces of black tourmaline.
Mm-hmm. We're going to have a event on shielding and things like that coming up here soon. So be watching for that on Awkwardly Zen too. One of the questions that came up a couple different times from what you just said is, there is that understanding that mirrors can be portals as well. So do you have some quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. Scrying is the official word for doing like crystal ball gazing. And very few people look in crystal balls now, but they do look into things like obsidian mirrors, and it's a form of clairvoyance. I suggest to people on those statements that I had, those are very critical for that, because if you do mirror gazing, where you look in a black mirror or you look into a silvered mirror, just like Alice in Wonderland, Alice Through the Looking Glass, you can open up portals that will allow entities to come through, and they may not be good entities to have around you. So if you want to do that type of thing, certainly use those two protective statements, those warm-up statements I gave you, so that you discern and you don't open up doorways into the astral plane.
Okay. And just so the rest of the group knows, I'm going to get through as many of these questions as possible, but we're definitely going to be tight on time. So please don't be offended if I don't get to your question. Okay. So if you have a soul agreement from a past life with a negative 4D ET entity, so that was a negative 4D ET entity, and then that entity came back to fulfill the agreement in your current life, would there be any way to get rid of that entity, or do you need to fulfill the agreement you made with it for it to leave?
I believe that these types of agreements are made in their corruption of a spiritual process, especially if they imply dark actions having to take place, such as curses that are multi-generational. So I believe that those agreements can be dissolved. And I've worked with many spiritual beings to dissolve those.
Okay. Let's see. Hold on one second. Okay, so this one's kind of interesting. So we have someone who set boundaries and it didn't work. And then they had a session with someone that could help them. And it turned out to be forced contract and bindings with many low vibrational entities that were placed on this person. So some contracts people agree to, they didn't agree. So they've been working on clearing and collapsing all of that. Do you have any thoughts on that with contracts, binding, vows, oaths, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I get a lot of people who've made oaths and vows in previous lifetimes, and a lot of those come through holding religious positions, and it might be a vow of celibacy, it might be a vow of poverty, things like that. It might be vows that say you would never do anything with your spiritual gifts, and those come through into this lifetime. That energy carries over subconsciously that you have to still honor those. I found that I can have people cancel those and disconnect those and release those because this life is to be lived for its purposes. And there might be a little bit of cleanup of debris from connections to other lifetimes, but I believe that those can always be taken away or canceled.
Okay. And so one of the questions is, you had mentioned that sage and salts are not working as well as they used to. So is there anything that can be done to up that clearing game?
I think we've reached a point where it's your visualization, it's what you create as images around you for protection is much more valuable than physical objects or things like that. And I mean, if you really like the sage, one of the things that makes it easier is there are a number of sage extracts that come in spray bottles, and frankly, it's a lot more pleasant than burning sage and having those odors around the house or around say if you're a reader at a fair, you can use a spray instead of using burning something.
Okay. And is part of it, just, this is a personal question, frequency too, like trying to keep your frequency as high as possible?
Yeah. Now, I do a lot of work with the level of consciousness scale out of the book Power versus Force by David Hawkins. David Hawkins felt that your frequency, your vibrational level, your level of consciousness was fairly fixed. I find that it varies quite widely. And if you go to Walmart on a sale day, you're going to pull in your energies. You don't want to interact with other people there. And when you're sitting at home on your favorite little meditation cushion, listening to your favorite music and zooming through the universe, your number goes way high. And so I too believe that you have a lot of control over who you are, what you are, and the shielding around you. One of the things that I suggest to people, there are a lot of people who are doing dark magic, dark entity work, and black magic, and a lot of them are sociopathic in this, where I'm going to teach those people a lesson. If they think they're all just special doing energy healing, I'm going to show them that there are things that they don't understand. Sort of that same nasty mentality you run into with people who put viruses on computers, that type of thing. And if you're walking down the street and you feel like you're being scanned, so to speak, somebody sitting drinking a coffee on the other side of the street in front of a Starbucks has an unnatural gaze at you, and you think, are they sending stuff at me? Again, visualization. Throw up a brick wall between you and them that you visualize, they will know that if they're sensitive and actually doing this, and they will probably back off because they don't know how strong or powerful you are. Not that you're going to actually do anything to them, but it just puts them on alert that they shouldn't mess with you. And by not actually reacting to them, sending stuff at them, you're not picking up any karma or any negative thing like that, but just visualize a brick wall between you and just move on your way. And that can be quite helpful for shutting down this stuff that some of these people who do nasty stuff. I just don't like that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. I just want to say before we go back into questions, for those of you who are not seeing the chat, if you go to davethemystic.com and you fill out the form for that, Dave's offering us a discount for Awkwardly Zen until the end of the year. And that's a reduced price of $180. And normally it's $225. So that's 20% off. So thank you so much for that, Dave. We always appreciate We appreciate when our practitioners come in and give us some love. Can you just talk about what they could expect if they got that session with you?
Yeah. Again, the process is 3 phone calls. The first phone call allow about an hour. We fill out the worksheet together. You're on your end, I'm on my end, and we fill it out. We identify everything that we're going to clear. Between the first and second phone call, I allow about a week, and I do the clearing sometime in there. I don't like to identify the specific day until I get back to you on the second phone call and then see if you felt a shift. On the second phone call, we talk about the results. There's additional information I get during the clearing, and then I'll talk to you about how you do protection around the people there. You can do it for yourself. You can do it on behalf of others if there are others in the house who wouldn't really want to participate. And then the protection around the property. And then about 2 weeks after that, we schedule a brief follow-up call where I do another recheck just to make sure nothing new has shown up. And then and that third phone call, I just mentioned that I provide a service that about 90 days down the road, 3 months out, just contact me, send me a text or something, and I'll do another quick recheck. So I include that. People say, why do you have to do these rechecks? And sometimes I joke that the model for me is I'm the exterminator. Your house might have some cockroaches, it might have some flies, it might have a scorpion in the basement, and we're going to get rid of those. If you still have some holes in your screen windows or some cracks around your doors, I could come back in 2 weeks. Everything that I worked on is gone, but you could have some new things that we just take care of just to get the final ones removed. So I joke about I'm the Orkin man a little bit.
All right. Thank you for that. Can you, and make sure you guys that you tell Dave when he should contact you, because you're all in different time zones and that he doesn't want to get a hold of you when you're not ready for it. And then also make sure that you say you were with Awkwardly Zen. And again, that's till the end of the year, 2021 for our video watchers later on. Can you talk a little bit about oaths against others or vows from others? Are those oaths that have passed me made in another life, or a vow against me from others?
Yeah, the oaths against others comes from the idea that in a past lifetime, you may have been getting assaulted, attacked on the way to being killed. And you said something to the other person like, I'll never forget this, I'll never forgive you, and God will never forgive you. These can create karmic linkages that can only be removed when you're in physical form again. And I kept running into these, so that's why I added it to the sheet. And so if you're the primary client, then when I do the clearing, I get the details for that, the who, what, when, where, why, and give that to you in a second phone call. And then I walk you through a script to release those connections with that person or those people who harmed you. I also do it the flip side, that sometimes in past lives, you're the bad guy. And people have these vows against you. You're the slave driver, you're the evil jailer, you're the torturer, or whatever. And again, I can identify the circumstances and then walk you through a script to release those connections and get that out of there too.
Okay. And can anyone do a clearing, or is there a reason why to work with someone who does it in a professional setting?
People who do the very basic forms of clearings, when I've talked to them or heard about them, frequently people do them. From my viewpoint, they're not very complete because they deal with two things. They categorically deal with earthbound spirits, people who've died and are hanging around, and they deal with dark entities. And other than that, they don't really differentiate too much. And so I've had a lot of clients who've been cleared previously by somebody else, and it didn't take care of the problems. And so they've come to me. And prices for clearings can go all over the map. I've tried to keep it reasonable. I think $225 is reasonable. Years ago, this young guy I met at a metaphysical bookstore, this store owner wanted me to talk to him, and he did sort of the very basic form of clearing, and he tells me, "Yeah, I think I'm very reasonable. I only charge $1,200." And this is like 7 or 8 years ago. I thought, well, good luck with that. I was charging $60 at the time to do clearings. And so there's a lot of variation in the services.
To each their own, right?
To each your own. Yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap up with this question. I'm sorry to all the questions that we did not get to, but how can someone tune in and have full access to their past life memories at will, and not only during flashback episodes or specific meditation?
That's a goal to work towards. I think you have to be very comfortable meditating and finding yourself in the spiritual plane so you can work on a scenario that works for you. You know, are you in a room that has TV screens? Do you actually journey back? Do you go to the Hall of Records? There's a lot of different metaphors for what the Akashic Records look like, and you need to probably be very comfortable with at least one of those on a visualization basis that becomes sort of almost like an out-of-body experience to do that. So it just takes time and practice and meditation, and to some degree also, you know, just keeping yourself safe so you don't make connections to things that are undesirable.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I want to take a second and thank Dave for his time today and his amazing insights. So much information, Dave, and we are so glad you're here. Hopefully we'll have you back again to talk with us soon. Again, davethemystic.com. You guys go check him out. Make sure you take advantage of that amazing opportunity he gave for 20% off for Awkwardly Zen. I do want to talk real quick about some other stuff we have coming up. We have the Artie party tomorrow. So those of you who like to be with others in a social situation and hang out and do some crafting or projects, please come join us tomorrow. I think our friend Kelly is going to be running that. We also have a lot of fun stuff coming up over the next few weeks. So make sure you're checking that on Meetup or on awkwardlyzen.com on the events section. You can check that out. For those of you who are new, awkwardlyzen.com is a free online community, and all of our Meetup events are free. However, we are about to delve into our first membership option, which is the mentorship membership. So I just put that over on the side there. The mentorship membership is an opportunity to get a little bit more one-on-one help. And whether that's on your spiritual path, or if you have a business and you're wanting some guidance in that, we have an amazing group of mentors and teachers who are going to be coming in and teaching and creating new content. Lots of them are in this room right now. So love to all of you who are working your tails off to make that happen. So check it out. And again, if you are interested in that, make sure that you sign up, that you are interested, because Awkwardly Zen members who get on that list will get a huge discount. It'll be $33.33 a month instead of $44.44 a month if you get on that list. So go do that. Yeah, we love our angel numbers here. So anyways, you guys, thank you so much for being here. Dave, thank you so much. We will be putting this video up on the webpage. Give us a couple days for that because it's all volunteer. And so you can come back and watch those things. Thank you again, Dave. We really loved having you. And thank you to all of you for being a part of Awkwardly Zen in this awesome morning.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And thank you, Julie, for being
Yes.
on as my friend and talking about her experience. So nice to talk to all of you. And yeah, I wish all of you the best.
And I can't wait to hear about all the clearings in the Zen Zoom. So come back and tell us how it goes. All right. Bye, guys.